How did that happen? How were you able to get to the battered women's shelter? How did that take
Um,
place?
Someone came and picked us up and took us to the
Hmm.
bus station. So we took the bus, and then I met my adopted mom and she took us there.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that's how we got there. And
Okay.
really, all of it was the Lord. He devised that plan. And, not everybody has those opportunities.
That's right. Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. I can only
so
imagine. Yes, yes. And so, Beth, um, I have a question here.
mhm.
Can you describe how you found the strength to leave? How long were you in with him? How long were you with him?
A total of about 11 years.
About 11 years. And so
Mhm.
was there a cycle of you leaving and coming back or um
Yes. I
okay.
think I left him about 3 or 4 times. And
Hmm.
even the last time, even though he put me through all of that and we got back and we were starting to reestablish, I had to pray before I talked to him because we always had to talk about our son. But I'm like, Lord, if you don't want me back with him, because I was weak, I had weak moments, fix it for me. So when I talked to him that day, I even had the audacity to say, do you want to get back together? He goes, I already found somebody. We weren't even divorced yet,
Hmm.
but he had already found somebody.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Yes.
that really saved me, honestly.
Yes, 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 yes. When you talk about what drove you to write your book,
Mhm.
what kinds of ways do you think this is going to be preventive or help women that are already in the situation that you were in?
Mhm.
What kind of ways that they can use from your book that'll help them to get that breakthrough that they need? Can you just kind of talk through that a little bit as well?
Yes. And one of the topics that I talked about was forgiveness. And that was
Hmm.
hard for me. But forgiveness is not for the abuser, it's for you. So God can heal you and you
Hmm.
can move on. You may have, some of that pain still, but, forgiveness is key because God expects us to forgive, or He won't forgive us. But forgiveness is key because if
Hmm.
you can't heal if you don't.
Right, right.
And
Yeah.
it took me 16 years to forgive him, but and being in the church and stuff, they teach forgiveness all the time. But sometimes it's hard, and it's
Hmm.
going to take people a minute to forgive because
Hmm.
it just depends on the severity of the situation too.
Uh-huh.
Never underestimate how someone else who's been abused. Don't ever I had to tell this to my dad, and because of the physical, the mental, all of that. Not everybody is physically abused, but their mental is just as bad as
Mhm.
physical, if not worse. But still, it's none of it's less, and I hope I'm saying it right.
Yes,
Uh,
yes, yes.
it's none of it's less because what one person is going through, you may not be. And so everyone matters, and that's something. And he really realized, my dad recognized that. He goes, I'm sorry, you're right. And so because the
Hmm.
physical, you have bruises, broken arms, those things, yes,
Hmm.
are very painful and traumatic and they heal. But when it comes to the emotional and mental aspects of it, it takes time to heal as well,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
sometimes longer. So,
Yes, yes. And so what are the primary things that an individual would need to really start on that healing process? Incorporating therapy,
hmm
your faith in God, um,
hmm
courage. Can you talk a little bit about that?
yeah.
Yes.
Number one, just starting to, love yourself enough to get yourself out of it, because sometimes we don't know how to love ourselves.
Mm.
Like I said, for me, it was my faith in God. I went into therapy. I even had one therapist. I really adored her because I was angry at the time. I had went through a lot of anger, and she taught me that everything begins with a negative or positive thought, then a chemical release, whether negative or positive, an emotion, and then a reaction or response. We have to change our mindset. And that's kind of hard when you're going through. but it begins with our mind because God wants us to, we're to be transformed by the renewing of our mind, as it says in Romans 12:2. We have to begin there. And,
Mm,
because sometimes you're going through a lot of depression, you're going through, some
mm,
people have post-traumatic stress disorder. They go through a lot of mental and emotional things due to it, and it's not their fault. They have to realize this is not their
mhm,
fault.
mhm,
And a
mhm,
lot of times they feel like it is, and it's not.
mhm, mhm. Yeah. How do you feel now, Beth, going through this journey? How long have you been uh, um, divorced your husband? I know you told me, but can you share that again? How long has it been since you've been out of this abusive situation?
Next month, it will be 27 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's
27.
amazing. That's
Mhm.
amazing. And so how do you feel now in your journey to um, rebuild yourself? Tell us all about that. Where are you now? And how are you able to help so many other women?
Um, I feel like there. I have my days, but I feel a whole lot better because one thing that I was taught, you have to deal with your whole person. You have to know your why, and that means dealing with your spiritual side, your mental and emotional, your physical, your relationships.
Mm,
You have to deal with everything,
mhm,
and in order to, because you have to deal with the whole person in order to become whole.
mhm,
And and there are still things in relationships that I'm still working on. But I'm a lot better, and there are things I will not accept now that I used to.
mhm, mhm,
And I still work on trust issues because I'm going to be honest, I still have some, but that's something that you have to work on daily.
mhm. Absolutely. And again, I can only imagine. I've never experienced personally
Hmm.
the kind of things that you have gone through, but I certainly know of individuals who have and how that
Hmm.
is how that can be impactful. Tell us a little bit about how that impacted your family when they saw you going through what you went through. How did that impact them?
It hurt. It hurt it affected my mom and dad in a way because, they didn't want me to marry him in the beginning. They felt like he would hurt me. They weren't wrong,
Mhm,
and my son, it affected him because here we were together all this time, and now we're having to separate and leave and go back to our home state and start afresh and anew. And he had his own battles, and I put him in therapy too because he was young. I wanted to make sure that he was okay.
mhm,
And he had his times too. It affects the children. We have to be mindful that it affects our kids just as much as it affects
mhm.
us.
And I'm glad
Here's
you
mom and
spoke to
dad
that.
separating.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, here's mom and dad separating. He has witnessed a lot, and even though the parent may not touch the child, if they're witnessing that, that's still considered domestic violence.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. The impact that it has on a child. And they're having, I'm sure, that the traumatic, does it
Mhm.
work on their behavior,
Mhm.
learning in school and responding to others? How does that impact a child in their relationship with other adults or other people?
Um, well, with my son, it was different because, like, my adopted dad played a big role in his life. And, he didn't sugarcoat things with him, but he loved him. He showed
Mhm.
that love. He showed what a real man's about. And then
Yeah.
my friend's husband, he was the same way. He showed him what a real man was about. And then our bishop, back home, he was the same way with them. You know,
Hmm. Hmm.
they, we had other people like his godmother. She was very prevalent in his life. And he had different godfathers and they showed up too. He had different people in his life to show him.
Awesome. That's awesome. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mhm.
It sounds like he was surrounded, even in the midst of
Mhm.
all that you and he had to go through, that there were still
Right.
people that loved him and showed him that love
Mhm.
and I know that kept him from falling apart and you as well. Can you tell me, you know, there are so many aspects of what you're talking about, the warning signs. Going back into the relationship after you've come out, what
Mhm.
made you go back, even though you were had a chance to come out, but what made
Mhm.
you go back? What made you return?
Number one, I think is I wanted to work on my marriage so bad. I
Mhm,
wanted to because I grew up where my biological parents, they divorced. I
mhm,
had to grow up fast. I'm the oldest of six, and there was abuse in the home too. So
mhm,
I grew up in that as well. And I had to grow up. I had to grow up fast. And you know, and I had to be I couldn't be a child, I couldn't be a teenager, so I had to grow up.
mhm,
I had to
mhm,
move fast, and I didn't want a divorce. I wanted to be like my grandparents. They, because where you're in your marriage, you stay until death do you part. I wanted marriage like theirs, but that didn't happen. So that
mhm,
was I felt like a failure at that point because
mhm,
what happened. So that kind of squashed it a little bit, but
mhm, mhm. At any time, Beth, that you feel like, and when I've been doing my researches and a part of that,
Mhm.
one of the things that stuck out was that the individual feels like it's their fault, or they feel
Yeah,
too ashamed to talk about it to others, and that's one of the reasons why they stayed locked into that situation, or they felt like
mhm.
they could change the individual, or they
That
just fled. Hmm.
I I thought that he would change. I did think that, but it never happened.
Hmm.
And my ex-husband, he had degrees in psychology and in pastoral. He went to seminary and had a degree in pastoral counseling.
Hmm.
So he knew how to play the game. He knew how to manipulate it, but the games, and that was part of it too. I didn't want a
Hmm.
divorce. I wanted it to work out,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
it wasn't good for us. Sometimes
Yes,
you have to
yes.
know when to get out and when to quit.
Yes, yes, yes.
So,
And that what gave you the courage to say, okay, this is enough. I'm putting a plan in place. I'm getting out. What gave you
mhm.
that courage to do that?
um, Going back to the prayer and consecration, that prayer, God, I have to say God because He's the only one, because I know Him as provider and protector, healer and deliverer. That's how and He's the one who got me out of it. And